Okay, so just to discuss, first of all, we'll get into some practical stuff, but also I just wanted to discuss in general some of the different categories and what are the different rules for each of them. So in general, it is important to know, first of all, when we're dealing with chametz, both in terms of what we can eat, what we can own, what we can buy, what we can benefit from. There's a lot of things which are not necessarily kosher for Pesach, but are not necessarily chametz either. And there'll be a few differences. But so, for example, the most obvious example is kitnios. When you have things which are kitnios, which are legumes, and we'll discuss what those are. So when it comes to that, you're not allowed to eat it unless there's certain health reasons. If a person for health reasons needs to eat kitnios, so then we will allow the person to do that. Obviously, each situation has to be judged on its own.
You're talking about Ashkenazim, because Friday meat getting yot.
Yes, you're right. Even for Ashkenazim, exactly. Even for Ashkenazim, for certain health reasons, we will allow a person to do that. But it becomes a little complicated because for non-sick people and for Ashkenazim, not only do we not eat kidneys, we won't even have something which is in a cooked in a kidneys pot. So therefore, I had a friend once. He had a daughter who had like a bunch of allergies, and therefore they were allowing her to have kidneys, but they had to have like a separate pot and all separate utensils, because even though she was allowed to eat it, not only were other people not allowed to eat it, they were also not allowed to have the kalim from that. And we'll also discuss that there are certain things which, again, although we wouldn't necessarily eat, but if they're not considered actual chametz, then you can own them, and you wouldn't have to sell them. You just can't eat them. Okay. Before we do that, it is good to know on a very practical level what things do not. So there are some things which don't require kosher Pesach certification, and there are some things which a lot of the kashrus organizations have gone out and done a lot of research to tell us that even though in theory there could be a problem with this, but we've checked into it and there's no problem. Someone just told me recently that someone told me recently that the Mishnah Brura, I don't know where it is. I don't know where it is. I have to look into it. But someone told me that the Mishnah Brura says that sugar, you can't have sugar on Pesach because there might be flour mixed in. So obviously that's not something that we're concerned about today. We do have sugar on Pesach. I guess it was a concern in the time of the Mishnah Brura. But that's just an example of where something could potentially be a problem. But our kashrus organizations have done the research and told us it's not a problem. For many of the sugars, especially regular white granulated sugar, they've gone a step farther actually and said it doesn't even need a Pesach certification. Again, because of the research that they've done, they know that there's no possibility of cross contamination, and therefore for sure the white granulated sugar is okay, and then again there's a whole list of things that are okay.
A slight modification to that. It's white granulated sugar of the major companies, which in Canada are Redpath Atlantic. The COR warns against buying it from the Dollarama, where they're packaged in other companies that may contaminate.
Right. In the U.S. it's Domino sugar, at least on the East Coast. West Coast is other companies. Yeah, but right, the major companies. But if not for that, so then even though it's just sugar, what could be in sugar? There is always a possibility of cross contamination. I once had a Starkey mashgiach who it's when I was living in California. So he was a mashgiach in China. He used to go factories in China. He'd spend roughly a third of the year in China, spread out over the year, and he would visit these plants. And he told me once that he was the reason he ended up in my house is he flew back from China and he was going. He lived in Phoenix and he stopped over in San Francisco when he was supposed to make it back home in time for Shabbos, and he ended up getting stuck, so we had him for Shabbos. But he told me that he was once at a company and he was certifying. He was there to certify some kosher for Pesach spices, parsley or something like that. And he's at the factory and he sees in the factory while they're packaging the parsley or whatever it was that there's something on the floor. So he asked one of the workers, "What is that on the floor?" And he said, "It's wheat germ." So they had to scratch that run. So it is a real concern. It is a real. It could be a real problem that especially factories that make many different things. So again, even if they're making something where which itself is not a problem, you'd think like huge companies, they're dedicated to a specific thing or they wash and clean everything very well. It's not necessarily true, and that's why the starting point is always that it does need certification. And then if these cautious organizations have done the research, then they'll tell us it's okay, right? So it's the red path, and then most of their sugars are okay. I'm not going to go through everything, but the COR put out this beautiful book. I suggest everyone got it. Actually, they mailed a bunch to the show. I just got them recently. So if anyone would like one of these beautiful books, free of charge, just let me know. You can either pick it up for me or happy to drop it off at your house. But a lot of very valuable information. Again, it's not necessarily knowing about halacha. It's also knowing about what's going on in the industry. And there are many products which don't require sometimes even Pesach certification, and sometimes they don't require any certification. For example, they say in here also that coffee, not instant coffee. Instant coffee could be a problem, and decaf coffee could be a problem. But regular ground coffee is all okay. You don't have to worry about it. Same thing for teas, pure black, green, and white tea is also okay without any Pesach or any certification. A lot of the nuts are okay. A lot of
Again, just going back to the coffee and the tea, except for flavored coffee, that's not good.
right.
And
Plain
flavored
and
tea,
not decaf, right?
and generally not decaf, yes.
Right. Right. In addition, also, for example, again, another example where the companies did the research. So there's lemon juice normally would require Pesach certification. They've determined that real lemon juice and real lime juice, which is certified by the OU, because they certify it, they know that there's no cross contamination, and therefore it's okay. Also, any eggs are not a problem. Any raw fruits and vegetables are not a problem. Even a lot of all frozen fruit without any additives is also okay. If there are any additives, you have to be careful because those additives could be a problem. There's actually, this was a question someone asked me recently. A lot of these lists, a lot of these books say that that shells are okay if they're almonds or walnuts, if they are without any additives, and if they're raw nuts with no additives are okay, which is the general rule. Someone actually sent me a picture of a packaging, and it was raw some kind of nuts. But in the allergen description, it said may contain soy or peanuts. So that's really one of the reasons why we don't have kitnios, why we don't have legumes, is because there might be something mixed in. And here, so even though normally it's okay if it was, let's say, walnuts, it would be okay, but because the packaging specifically states may contain soy or peanuts, so in that case it would not be okay. So you do have to look out for these things. Again, just because raw nuts without any additives are okay. If in the allergen information it does say it may contain soy, which is definitely kitnios and peanuts, which we'll discuss in a moment. So therefore, that would also be a problem.
Rabbi,
Yeah,
um, the many companies put the warnings on to prevent themselves from getting lawsuits. So if they're a big company and they may sometimes use soy or they would put it on not because they expect there to be actually any in it, but it's more of a liability in case there's a mashahu in it.
right,
Now, you can find products that have hashkochas that say they pariv, but it says may contain milk.
right.
What, so, but no one treats it as if it's milchik. So I'm not sure, or I wonder. Uh, no, but kitnios is not a mashahu of kitniot. I'm not sure how big a problem that would be.
Yeah.
If it's
So a lot of, I mean, I looked over and a lot of the COR, I believe the OU says the same thing. They say it is a problem. It's more than just, the actual concern. Once they're saying that it might contain it, so then it also shows that we don't necessarily know what else is going on in the factory. So therefore, that's why it is recommended. You're right. Even though it's kidneys, it's not chametz, and therefore we're a little more lenient there. Still, it is. We do say that is not recommended. The other thing that I would point out, which one might not necessarily assume is a problem, but could possibly be a problem, is milk. And milk. So a lot of the milks do have a Passover certification. At least from what I've seen. I haven't spent too many Pesachs in Canada, so I don't know for sure. For sure, all the Chal Yisrael milk will be kosher for Pesach. There are those that recommend that if you can't find milk with a kosher Pesach certification, so because sometimes they feed the cows non-kosher for Pesach food, therefore it is recommended. So you can still get it without kosher certification, but you should buy it all before Pesach. When it comes to what we call bitzel, when it comes to when there's a mashahu, when there's a drop of something possibly in the milk, if you buy it before Pesach, so then we say that it's batal, that it's nullified. But on Pesach, then we're not. So again, it is recommended if you're not going to buy milk with a kosher for Passover certification, that you buy all your milk before Pesach. And again, there's a lot of other things that you don't necessarily assume you could buy without a kosher for Pesach certification, but you could. So I think it is worthwhile. Again, for those who just joined, we do have this COR Pesach guide. I have enough copies for anyone who wants. So contact me. I'd be happy to drop one off by you, or you can come pick one up and you can go through that. Okay. Okay. To move on to kitnios, right? So kitnios, we normally translate it as legumes, and the kind of the history behind that. This was a Ashkenazic custom. The Sephardic Jews do not have this custom, but the Ashkenazic Jews have a custom that they wouldn't have any legumes. We'll discuss in a moment what exactly is included in that. But just the history behind why it's prohibited, especially before there were kashrus organizations that would send people to China and to Idaho and to all sorts of remote places to certify things. We really didn't know what was going on in the field, and therefore, if you had a field where they were processing beans, and they were putting them in sacks, and then they were coming and selling them. Well, often those same sacks were used the week before for wheat, and there might be wheat mixed into the beans and other things. And therefore, they said that anything that was traditionally stored with wheat, you shouldn't have it on Pesach. Again, only an Ashkenazi custom and not a Sephardic custom. Um, so the things which the rabbis of that time said are prohibited included bean, included mustard seed. That's why for kosher for Pesach, if you want to get mustard, you have to get imitation mustard because mustard seed is kitnios, green beans, soy, rice, lentils, buckwheat, chickpeas, all those things are kitnios. Now, recently, um, not recently like yesterday, but recently, I guess we can say in the past 100 years. So they developed a question because now, if we wanted to, right, practically, this is not really a concern anymore, right? If we wanted to get kosher for Pesach beans, so we can actually send a mashgiach to go out into the fields and to ensure that there's no wheat here. The bags that they're using don't have wheat in them. The transport machines don't have any wheat in them, any grains in them, and therefore today we do have ways where we can certify that these products are actually kosher for Pesach. However, even though that's true, just because we could certify that today, but once this became the custom not to have any of these beans, any of these legumes, therefore that custom remains, and it's still prohibited to eat beans on Pesach, again for Ashkenazic Jews. The question then became, though, well, what about there were certain things that were originally included on that list. What about things that were not included on that list? Right? What about things that they didn't have in Europe at that time when they made this decree? What about things that, let's say, are native to North America or South America, and they didn't have access to them? So one of the questions that came up was peanuts, right? Peanuts were not something that they had in Europe. I don't remember the whole history of peanuts, but peanuts might even be native to North America. Is that correct?
Sounds reasonable.
Yeah, sounds right? So therefore, peanuts. So therefore, if we're looking at something like peanuts, well, on the one hand, it is a legume. It is similar to beans and these other seeds which are prohibited. But on the other hand, we don't really have a concern today because we have ways to certify that it's kosher for Pesach. We have that there's no grains in there, and it was never included. So that was a big question. Ramosha Feinstein, one of the great halachic authorities of the 20th century, so he ruled that you could have peanuts on Pesach because there's no actual concern, and we can get in a way where there's no actual concern that there might be grains, and it was never included in the original decree. So therefore, he said unless there develops a custom not to, he said that eating peanuts on Pesach is okay as long as you can ensure that there's no chametz. And I think it actually used to be more popular. Today, I think the very prevalent minhag, very prevalent custom is not to have peanuts on Pesach. A more recent question also came up about quinoa, right? Especially when starches are harder to find on Pesach, quinoa is a great side dish. So could you have quinoa? So that's also a discussion. That I would say is much more split. Peanuts, I think the prevalent custom is not to have peanuts. Quinoa is split, and there are a lot of people who have quinoa, even though quinoa is kind of in the same category we would associate it with beans and buckwheat and rice and things like that. But because it wasn't part of the original decree, and we can go send mashgiach to make sure that there's no chametz. I believe the Star Case policy is that, which is one of the kashrus organizations, is that they'll only certify it if they use new bags when they pack the quinoa.
Yo-yo hashgacha pays Passover hashgacha to quinoa.
Huh?
The OU also gives Passover hashgacha to quinoa.
Yeah, there are a number of organizations. So that's what they've ruled, and then there are others that
And
don't.
if I
Um,
recall, the quinoa is different than other legumes in that other legumes represent the seed or the resultant of, whereas quinoa is another part of the plant. It's not the same construct as other
yeah,
beans,
I think also quinoa may be in the spinach family, if I remember
possibly.
correctly.
Let me look
Yeah.
it up while you talk.
Okay. So therefore, because it's right, it's not technically a legume. It's similar to that. It's very similar to rice and lentils and buckwheat and beans. It's like a similar type of product. So therefore, there are people who don't eat it, but there are many people who do as well. If you would ask me what I think you should do, if a person does not have a minhag, then I see no reason not to do it. I think you could rely on the more lenient opinions as long as the quinoa is certified for Pesach. So then that would be okay. It's also important to know that when it comes to kitnios, and when it comes to kitnios, even though you're not allowed to eat kitnios, and as you mentioned, not only could you not eat it, even if you have a pot which you cooked rice in, you shouldn't use that pot now on Pesach. But you're allowed to benefit from it, and you're allowed to own it. So if you own rice, you don't have to sell your rice with your chametz. You could just leave it in the cabinet. It's also a lot of medicines, even the medicines which are not okay for Pesach. Um, there are opinions that say that medicine is not really food, so therefore it's not a problem anyways. But even those who are more stringent, you'd be allowed to own it because you're allowed to own kidneys and you're allowed to benefit from it. Now, how could you benefit from it if you can't own it? So for all those pet owners out there, this really makes a big difference because you cannot feed your pet chametz on Pesach. That is prohibited. So whether you have a cat, whether you have a dog, whether you have a fish, you cannot feed your any of your pets chametz on Pesach. That's considered benefiting. But if you have kidneys, if all it has is kidneys, then that is not a problem. Then you would be allowed to have that on Pesach and have it on Pesach, and you can give it to your animals. You can give it to your animals on Pesach. Okay. Um, when it comes to selling chametz, so let's talk about that for a minute. So first of all, it is important to realize, and I mentioned this in Shul the other day. It is important to realize that that when we sell chametz, we don't sell chametz the way we sell other things. We um, normally halachically, what makes a sale valid is when you hand over the product to a person, and then that person actually picks it up, and there's actually a reason behind that. So if I would go into your store and I would pay you for an object, technically I don't own that object until I actually pick it up, even though I've already paid you for the object. And the Gemara explains the reason for that is because we're afraid if I pay you for an object, the object's not here, it's really somewhere else. We're afraid that you can actually trick me into buying an object that got destroyed, right? Maybe your item got destroyed. Your farm, you have your storehouse filled with grain. It got destroyed. So you know what? You quickly run to me. You say, "Oh, do you want to buy my grain?" I give you the money. Now it's mine. And then we go to the grain, and sure enough, it burned down. So avoid that problem, to protect the buyer, the Chachamim rule, the Gemara rules that in order for a sale to be valid, I actually have to pick it up, and therefore it protects the buyer in a certain way. So therefore, technically, if you wanted to sell your chametz to a non-Jew, the way to do that would be actually to take it all to his house, and we'll unload it into his garage, and now he'll pick it all up, and now it'll all be his, right? Or to come to your house and to pick up all your chametz, or to bring it to, even another way to do it is to be, if it's in his actual domain, he could acquire the chametz that way. Obviously, these reasons are not practical. So we have other ways around it. One of the things we do is what we do what's called a kinyan chalipin, which is a switch, which means that it's not a payment of money, but I give you something, and then when you acquire that, so then I automatically own your object. We also rent the space under the chametz. Therefore, if he owns your, let's say you're selling chametz in your garage, if you're renting it to him the space in your garage, so now the chametz is not in your possession anymore; it is in his possession. Without getting into all the rules, it is a bit complicated what we do, but there are certain leniencies. Despite that, though, it is a very old and strong custom that we do sell chametz to a non-Jew. However, there are those that take the attitude and they say, well, since we are relying on certain leniencies, we're going to try to avoid it whenever possible. And therefore, there are people who try to get rid of their chametz instead of selling it to the non-Jew. Someone who wants to do that, they're welcome to do that. But again, definitely not required to do that. The other thing that some people do is they say we'll sell chametz to a non-Jew, but not real chametz. Meaning there are certain things which may be chametz, maybe not be chametz, and therefore they'll only sell things which are definitely chametz, which are not definitely chametz, but not things which definitely are chametz. So what do I mean by that? For example, if you have bread, right, in your house, that's definitely chametz. That is the definition of chametz, is bread, cakes, cookies, things like that. So therefore, that they won't sell. Um, but if you have something, let's say like flour, right? So flour is just flour. Now we would never use that flour on Pesach. We wouldn't even use it in the matzah factory to make matzah, just to buy regular flour from the store, because there is a possibility that it got wet at some point, and therefore we never eat it. But because it's not actual chametz, because this is just flour, it hasn't actually been mixed with water. Therefore, that's like on a lower level, and therefore there are people who will sell that. And again, the kashrus organizations have really helped us out here. They've told us what things definitely. Some of them are obvious. Again, bread, cakes, cookies, pasta. All of those things are definitely chametz. But there's other things which are not pure chametz, which are just a possibility of chametz, and therefore, if a person wants to take that approach, then they can do that. But again, definitely not required. What is required when you're selling your chametz, first of all, as I mentioned before, it's a little bit complicated. So someone called me last year, someone who actually had a non-Jewish relative. So they say, I'll just sell it to my non-Jewish relative. So I said, it's not so simple. I don't recommend that you do that, even if you have a non-Jew who is willing to buy it from you. And therefore, what I do recommend is that you sell it with me, and I will take care of it, make sure it's sold in the appropriate way. There should have been a form that went out. If anyone does not have that form, it's a pretty simple process. Just fill out your basic information and basic information about the chametz. You don't have to. I don't need every detail. Just get a general idea of what the chametz is, and then I would go ahead and sell it to the non-Jew. However, um, um, uh, uh, because you're still keeping the chametz in your possession, you're not actually loading up all the chametz into your car and bringing it over to the non-Jew's house and putting it in his house. You're actually just keeping it in your cabinet. Therefore, there is the concern that you might accidentally open your cabinet, as you mentioned last week. Therefore, any chametz which you plan on selling, it is very important to put it in a specific place, to know where it is, and to actually seal it off in some way, where at least it'll serve as a reminder not to go ahead and eat the chametz. Okay. Um, the This year, and we'll talk more about exactly what to do on Friday and Shabbos. Actually, on Sunday we're going to have the Shabbos Hagadol Drasha, or the Sunday Hagadol Drasha, I guess we can call it. And therefore, there we'll go through all the laws of special laws for this year, because since Erev Pesach is on Shabbos, excuse me, we can't do some of the things that we normally do on Shabbos, and therefore some of them get pushed off a little bit. There's a little bit of a different schedule. But just when it comes to selling the chametz, one point about that, specific for this year, because because Shabbos is Erev Pesach. So therefore, we run into a little bit of a problem. What do I mean by that? The problem we're going to run into is as follows: that Friday night and Shabbos morning, so like every Shabbos, we have an obligation to have a Shabbos meal. Part of a Shabbos meal is having bread. Now, you can't eat matzah because you're not supposed to eat matzah on Erev Pesach. Um, but so there's basically two solutions. And again, we'll go through more of these details on Sunday. But the basic two solutions that a person could do is either they can have what's called egg matzah, which means it's flour and it's actually not made with eggs. Sorry to burst your bubble if you thought it was. It's actually usually made with some kind of juice. And therefore, uh, in general, we don't eat that on Pesach unless the person is sick and can have regular matzah. But in general, we don't eat that on Pesach. However, technically, it's not chametz. Chametz is only when you have flour and water. If you have flour and other juices, then technically it's not Pesach. So in general, it's not chametz. So in general, we don't eat that on Pesach. However, Erev Pesach, where at the time when you're allowed to eat chametz, if you're allowed to eat chametz, for sure you can eat egg matzah. So that's one, and since it's not technically chametz, so therefore you don't necessarily have to be worried about if you accidentally didn't get rid of a crumb and it got into your food, and you don't have to be asked. You should try to be careful, but you don't have to be as concerned because it's not actual chametz. Egg matzah is not actual chametz. That's one approach a person could take. The other approach a person could take is actually to have bread. You're still allowed to have bread, so therefore the bread that you'll save a little bit of bread, just enough what you need for Shabbos, and then you'll eat it on Shabbos. The problem again, the problem with that when it comes to selling the chametz is that, okay, but wait a second. I'm not gonna. Normally, I would sell the chametz on Erev Pesach. So if Erev Pesach, at close to the end of the time you're allowed to own chametz, I would meet with the non-Jew and I'd sell him all the chametz. Well, this year that's Shabbos, so I can't sell the chametz. You're not allowed to make sales on Shabbos. I can't sell it to him on Shabbos. Therefore, I'm going to sell it to him on Friday. Okay. So therefore, practically, what a person should do. So, but what if I'm selling him everything on Friday? So I can, if I'm going to sell him your challah that you plan on using for Shabbos, your bread that you plan on using for Shabbos, well, now you can't eat it because it's not yours. It's the non-Jews. I already sold it. And if we so therefore, what I will instruct people to do is that if you plan on having bread, and I'll mention this specifically to the non-Jew, so you're going to exclude that from your sale. I want to sell you all my chametz except for the bread that I'm planning on eating on Shabbos. But since that's not included in the sale, so that chametz now has to be gotten rid of, right? Meaning all the other chametz in your house, I'm going to sell for you. But if you're leaving over, let's say you're going to have one challah or two challahs, or let's say you're going to have rolls or whatever you're going to have, right? If you're saying, well, that's not included in the sale, well, now it's not included in the sale. And once it's not included in the sale, then if you have to finish that, you can't eat it. So therefore, what I suggest practically, after all that introduction, practically what I suggest is as follows. Again, you can either take the egg matzah approach, and then I'll let you know approximately what time I'm selling the chametz, and then just make sure that after that time, you're not going to eat any chametz. After, let's say I'm going to sell it at in the afternoon, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, I'm going to sell your chametz. So after 1 o'clock, you don't eat any more chametz, right? You'll have your egg matzah Friday night and Shabbos morning. And besides for that, you don't eat any chametz because I'm going to sell all your chametz to the non-Jew. That's one approach you can take. If a person does want to have bread for their Shabbos meals, so then what I would suggest is you very carefully calculate exactly how much bread you're going to have. If you're two people, right, you make 2 rolls for each meal, and then calculate exactly what you're going to have. Make sure to eat it before the end of the time of that you're allowed to eat it, and then throw the crumbs away, and then you're okay. Because again, if you're just going to leave over more than you need, so then you're going to get in trouble. So therefore, that's what I would suggest. Again, calculate exactly what you need. Either just challah, if you want to have dessert, you can calculate whatever you want. But again, calculate exactly what you're planning on using on Shabbos. Put that aside. Specifically state that this is not included in the sale. I'm going to tell the non-Jew also this is not included in the sale. And then whatever's there, whatever you left over that you didn't include in the sale, now make sure that that's completely finished before the end of the time that you're allowed to eat chametz. If you don't finish it, then you could. So obviously you can't burn it, but you could get rid of it in other ways. What I would suggest is crumple it up into little crumbs and flush it down the toilet. That's another way of getting rid of your chametz.
I mean, the other complexity of eating the chametz on Shabbos, of course, is that everything in the house is kosher for Passover.
Right.
So you have to essentially find a space where it's not going to you're not going to have crumbs contaminating anything.
Right. Again, we could discuss that more on Sunday. Right. You can eat outside. You could, depending on what the weather is. That's always will cause you less anxiety. Or if you have a disposable tablecloth, eat on that. Just have your bread, wrap it up, put it away, and then you're okay. Yeah. So again, we'll go through more of the practicals on Sunday. But again, just in terms of selling your chametz, when a person, you don't have to decide now when you give me the document, but before I sell it, just make sure you've decided what you're planning still on eating. You put that aside, that you eat, and you have to calculate very well, and anything else then you have to get rid of. Okay. And then again, just to review specifically about egg matzah. So when it comes to egg matzah, like I said, in general, we don't eat it on Pesach unless a person is sick and for health reasons they can't have regular matzah, but they could have egg matzah. Then it would be okay. But already from the time when we stop eating chametz on Shabbos, a person should stop eating egg matzah as well. Should eat egg matzah as well. Okay. Any questions?
Excuse me, Rabbi.
Yeah.
Rabbi, I understand that you're not supposed to eat matzah within a 30-day period before Pesach, or depending which minhag is.
Right.
Is egg matzah a problem of eating it before Pesach?
The short answer is no, especially in this circumstance where we have where we're limited on our choices. In general, I would not suggest it, eating egg matzah. But in this circumstance, where especially if you're nervous to have the chametz, so then egg matzah is 100% a good solution.
So a follow-up question, Rabbi, is if I turn my kitchen over on Thursday or even Wednesday, can I eat egg matzah for the rest of the week?
Yeah. Again, generally, yeah, you could.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. When it's not Shabbos, it's less of a problem because you don't necessarily have to have bread, right? You could just have other things. But yeah, egg matzah would be okay. The other thing you can do is, I wouldn't put it near my pots, but if you have kidneys, if you have anything which is kidneys, so then that wouldn't be a problem. Someone actually suggested to me it's a good idea, right? He said, once they clean an area for Pesach, especially if you're little kids, it's very hard, it's very hard that even once you've cleaned an area to keep it clean until Pesach. And therefore, someone asked me, and I think it's a very good idea, if he could have kidneys products in those areas. And that's 100% okay. Again, especially if it's not an eating area. Let's say their kids want a bedroom in their snack, and a snack in their bedroom. So could they have a kidney snack? It's a good idea because then even if there's crumbs, you don't have to get rid of crumbs of kidneys. You're allowed to own it. It's allowed to be in your house. Not allowed to eat it, but you're allowed to own it. So that would be a good solution. Let's say you've cleaned your car and you're traveling. You want to have food in your car. As long as there's no chametz in your car, especially if you go to the grocery store and you get products that are kosher for Pesach but kidneys, so you don't have them in Pesach, but if you would have them in your car, then there's no reason that you'd have to clean your car again to get rid of all of that.
And egg matzah crumbs would have the same status, I assume.
Yeah, correct. Correct. All right. Any other questions?